Okay, hi everyone, and welcome. I'm just going to kick it off now, just because it's a short session. So I'm Roisin from the Department of Technology Enhanced Learning, and many thanks for coming along today. I know it's a very busy week for people. Um, so the recording of the session will be available afterwards as well, and you'll be able to access it through YouTube. It's streaming live on YouTube now, and you'll be able to access it as well. I'll send out the link to it and any other kind of resources that I'll be covering today. So I'll send that out by email probably tomorrow. Um, so what we're looking at today is creating teaching and learning content for a diverse learner group. Now, maybe you're not an academic staff member, that's fine. I can see from registrations for the session, maybe you're staff support or student support, or maybe you're involved in designing or working with digital systems that people are using. But hopefully you'll pick up some practical tips for this from this short session. And I think it's kind of applicable in a variety of settings as well. I'm going to turn off my camera there in a second, just because I'm streaming this from home, in case my internet goes funny. So what we're looking at is creating accessible content and providing an inclusive learning environment for our learners. So that's regardless of their abilities, their backgrounds, their primary language, any short-term injury or illness they might have, any caring responsibilities they might have, location, the list goes on really. So all of this diversity and these sort of diverse needs can present in different ways, and that's kind of part of what we're doing, what, why we're doing what we're doing. So you could have something like you could have somebody who has difficulties accessing information. So people with visual or hearing impairments, physical disabilities. So they might experience barriers in actually accessing the information in the first place, and might rely on things like screen readers, text to speech, or other assistive technologies. So we want to be quite aware of this. You might have someone who has difficulties with comprehension or information processing. Maybe they have difficulties with time management, or organization. Maybe they've issues with focusing on a lot of information, or maybe they might find it difficult to kind of to see linkages in between content, or between content and assessments, that kind of thing. Maybe they have attendance difficulties. They might have regular medical appointments that they need to get to, or difficulties with retention or recall, or issues with kind of time-bound assessments, or maybe just even strict time limitations that might be applied to things in general. So these are just kind of some of the considerations we need to think of when sharing any digital content, and I'll touch on a few of these as we go through. But there's probably even things with that list that might be sparking something with you at the moment as well, in terms of kind of what to be aware of, or how maybe things could be adjusted to make them easier to access. Um, so why do we need inclusive teaching and learning content? Again, I kind of went through that there, but it's all about digital accessibility really, which is ensuring that all of our digital content, whether it's websites or documents or anything, that it's all designed and developed to make it usable by everybody. So that includes people with disabilities. Um, it's now a legal requirement in Ireland since 2020. So this legislation is based on the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or the WCAG 2.1 AA guidelines. So that's the standard for accessible digital content. These guidelines are now at 2.2, but they were developed by the World Wide Web Consortium, the W3C, and they are responsible for kind of developing international standards for design and development on the web. Here in MTU, we're a public body, so all of our content, whether publicly facing or whether it's content on our LMS, Canvas, or on Workvivo, anything like that. It all really needs to be accessible. So I'll be going through a few different kind of items and give some tips and ideas on how to make files and documents more accessible, and how to make the online environment using things like Canvas and Zoom as examples more inclusive. So there's a lot of ways that this can be done, and these are just some of the examples. And I'll provide some kind of resources at the end as well, and I'll make these available after with the recording link. Okay, so the first one I want to touch on here is documents. Now, many of these examples, uh, they use kind of the example of from Microsoft Word, but it is really applicable in most document editors or word processors, which tend to have much the same options available. So you'll also see as we go through this that these elements we discuss across this will be applicable when creating content within Canvas or other kind of online tools. So hopefully you can pick up a couple of tips from this. So the first one, I suppose, is looking at kind of the common accessibility issues that can arise for people. And what we're looking at is how we make improvements in these for these issues, and how that could actually make our content more accessible in general. So once we're aware of the kind of the common accessibility issues that are there, we can really improve access to these documents and resources for everybody, basically. So the first one here, which is an important one, is document structure. So what we're talking about here is using heading styles to structure your document. So this also relates to kind of formatting tools generally within your word processor or your content editor. So make use of the formatting options that are available, like lists as well. A big thing there with heading styles is if you use the heading styles to structure your document, don't skip the heading levels. So if you have, heading 1, don't skip down to heading 3. A big thing with this is that if you have somebody who's using a screen reader, it will take the structure in the kind of the logical format that you've laid out within your document. So if you kind of skip around it, it makes it harder for people to kind of see the structure and how the kind of information is flowing through that. Within Word, you can check like your document structure using the navigation panel as well. So you can see in this screenshot here, this is all done using the heading styles, and you can see quite easily that there's a kind of a hierarchy in terms of the structure of the document and the content that's provided within it. Um, but it also kind of doing this with the structure as well, it kind of helps if you're translating the document to a different file format as well. So say for instance you're moving it from Word to PDF, or maybe you're even just viewing a Word document on Google Docs or something like that. If you have the correct headings, the correct heading levels, the correct structure, all of that, um, it just makes it easier to kind of port over into this different system, or this different file format. It also, which I think you might be able to see from this screenshot here, it makes it easier for people to kind of scan the document and kind of find the information that they might need. So a little bit like the table of contents. And then you can also kind of just kind of have a quick look over the document structure as well. It also has other benefits in terms of time management for yourself. So it is possible to kind of move around the headings and the kind of content jumps with it. You can also very easily make a table of contents as well if you have the heading structure done using this formatting tools within the document as well. So all of that can kind of have a double benefit, basically benefit you and benefit anybody that's using your document. Another important one here is color. It's another kind of important consideration for any of your digital content. So there's a couple of things that you might need to consider here if you want to use, say, colored font, or if you're using one thing that can be kind of common is if you have text on top of, like, say, a background color or something like that. Um, just ensure that there's sort of sufficient contrast between the text and the color that it's on. Um, so there's a few tools that you can use that can kind of help you find a good contrast there. There's some browser extensions that you can add, and there's different sort of light applications that you could download that might help. From a kind of an accessibility compliance perspective, the contrast ratio should be at least 4.5 to 1 or above. But it's very hard, obviously, to know how you're getting on with that. So that's why these kinds of tools are useful. The tool in the screenshot there is the TGPI color contrast checker, but there's also WebAIM, and there's a few different ones that are available. Another thing as well to mention in terms of color is avoid using color as the only way to highlight content. So some people will maybe put their text in red if it's supposed to be important. A good tip here, if you're trying to kind of test how accessible the colors are in your document, consider printing it out in black and white, or what it would look like if you printed it out in black and white, basically in grayscale. Is that red highlighted text, does it show up as important when you have it printed as well? Probably not. So, having things like just, putting in extra text saying this is important to remember or something like that. Just don't use color as the only way to kind of highlight the content. Basically, is the tip there. In terms of imagery, one very common issue is the sort of the lack of alternative or alt text for images. So alt text will kind of help to describe any visual content like images, graphs, or anything like that within your document. It's used to describe the images to a screen reader, but also if you have content that is slow to load. I'm sure you've all experienced this. If you have a website that's loading and some of the images just won't load yet, the alternative text will actually show up, and it helps you to decide if that's an image that you should seek out, if you want to kind of click and reload it, or if you can just ignore it, if it's just something that's there for aesthetics or anything like that. In terms of like the actual alt text that you might be adding to your images, what we're talking about here is a very literal description, but something that's quite short and concise. So about 140 characters. So the screenshot in this slide, it shows the alt text editor in PowerPoint. And this can actually also auto-generate alt text for you, uh, which you can try. You can try it as an example, but very often you do have to kind of edit it yourself as well. If you do have an image that's just decorative, you can see at the bottom of that screenshot, it just says mark as decorative. There's a few different ways that you can do it depending on the software that you're in. If you mark it as decorative, it tells the system or the person reading it or anything like that it can just be ignored. You don't need it in terms of like the understanding the context of anything like that. If you have an image that's a little bit more difficult to describe, maybe it's harder to describe it in one or two short sentences, consider maybe using a long description within the text itself, and that might help to sort of describe it and in place of the alt text as well. Links are another one. So again, very relevant for adding content in Canvas or web pages or emails or anything like that. So it's recommended to replace any long URLs or long links that you might have and kind of put in some meaningful text in place of those long URLs. So in Word or most word processors and things like that, or an email if you're using Outlook or anything, it's quite easy to format links in this way. So usually if you highlight the link and if you're kind of adding it as a link or anything like that, it'll usually give you the option to edit it. And what you can do is add your meaningful title um, to this link. It just makes it kind of easier for people to know what it is they're clicking on. So rather than having something like click here for more, it doesn't really give people a lot of context. One tip that I've seen that is quite useful is if you take out all of the links that you have in your document, and if you put them at the bottom of the document, would they make sense as to where they're going to lead you? And if not, then maybe consider adding your meaningful title to it. So in this example, you can see that the link that's used is the title of the paper. You know, these kinds of ideas that maybe if taken out of context of your what you've written, will it make sense as to where this link is going to lead you? And it can also be useful as well for kind of security reasons as well, like that, just to make sure that it's user friendly, basically. Another one here that can be quite difficult to accomplish is to use simple language. So trying to use clear and consistent words throughout your content or your communications. Um, it kind of helps to reduce any possible sources of ambiguity for the end user. Um, so it's quite important for students with different educational backgrounds, students for whom, English isn't their first language, any students or learners with cognitive disabilities. So trying to avoid using, and I know this is difficult in academia, but trying to avoid using overly technical terms that haven't yet been introduced. Um, or perhaps kind of considering adding a definition or a kind of a glossary to your content, or like that, maybe kind of links to further information. Um, if basically by keeping the language simple, you're kind of ensuring that things can be quickly scanned and understood as well. Um, so that it just makes it more accessible for your users. The last thing here is just kind of related to using tables within your content. So the main advice really related to tables that you'll see in guidelines and within any accessibility checkers is to ensure that you identify table headers. So again, this kind of helps it helps screen readers to kind of make sense of the information that's in a table. It kind of shows a bit more of a logical structure. Um, it basically just kind of makes tables a bit clearer. Things to avoid with tables, which is something that is very, very common, is to use invisible tables to kind of lay out content using nested tables or merged cells, because it's hard to avoid, but I suppose like that, it's just best practice really to try to avoid those. If you think about it, even in the way that you might be kind of reading information line by line or row by row, this is sort of how the screen readers will read the information, and it might just not make as much sense um, if there's nested content or kind of merged cells and things like that. I just want to show this image as well. So one of the things about the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines is that there's a lot of information there. It's kind of a lot to remember. So this acronym here is one of a few acronyms that are kind of around that might help you in kind of reminding yourself of some of the common issues and how to avoid them. Um, so it's developed by Worcestershire County Council, and it covers again just like a lot of the issues, and then has a little bit of a description at the bottom that will kind of maybe jog your memory on some of the things that should be kind of addressed with regards to those the creating content. It's more applicable to kind of documents and things like that, but I have another one I can share later on for sort of if you're sharing kind of videos and things like that a lot. Um, just the last point here as well is just kind of making use of available tools and technologies. So by this, what I'm thinking is any of the accessibility checkers that are built into most of the text editors or word processors that you might be using. So they can be really useful to kind of scan the content before you finalize it in the same way that you might check for grammar or spelling or anything like that before you finalize a document. Just running one of those checkers is quite useful. So Microsoft and Adobe have really good ones. Inside Canvas as well, there's some accessibility tools. There's a built-in Canvas accessibility checker, and then we also have um, this tool called UDoIt. It's available in all modules, and that will help you to kind of scan your module and check for accessibility issues. I'll come back to that shortly there. And another one then as well that's available through it's on the library website. It was brought in by the DSS in the library, and it's called Census Access, and that's a nice tool for converting your files to a more accessible format. So it could be used by staff or students, and like that, it could kind of help if you're trying to view a document, even just viewing it easier on your phone, or like that if you have a student or if you yourself are using assistive technologies, then maybe it might be a more appropriate, be able to output a more appropriate format for those. I'm just going to move on as well there to talk specifically about some media, so video or imagery that you might have in your module, or if you're sharing content on in any digital format really. Um, so one of the big things with any media, videos, images, sound, is to provide multiple options for accessing the media. Um, so just a few examples of how you could do that. So one of the main points, I suppose, is to include closed captions for video content. So whether that's live content, say you're using Zoom or Teams, or if you have a recorded video or anything like that. So it's not only important for students or staff or anybody with hearing impairments, but also anybody who might be viewing the content in a busy environment. Say there's a lot of noise, if they're commuting, if they're non-native speakers. There's a huge range of reasons to use captions, and many of the platforms, the video platforms like YouTube and Vimeo, they often offer kind of auto-generated captions. Um, Now there's kind of varying levels of accuracy with this, but they do give you the option to kind of edit it. So it might be a quick way of sort of starting to get your captions show up in it. So you can have it auto generate and then go in and edit it and kind of refine it then afterwards. Another important one as well is including, say, transcripts for recorded content. So whether that's kind of video or audio, if you have animation, or if you're doing like a software demo, if you've got a screen recording. So again, there's kind of different services you can use online to create automated transcripts, and again, you can kind of go in and edit them and things like that. But also, say if you have a script or something, or you might have some notes. This can also help to sort of generate, or it can be used to sort of start generating the transcript for any of your media and things. So this is the screenshot here is just an example of something that was developed in a software package that we have, where you can kind of just minimize the transcript, and you could see it as well. You might see it if you're accessing videos yourself, that there is a way to kind of just click in and see the transcript, and it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to take up too much space. Basically, you can kind of access it easy enough. Here's the alt text thing again. again, very important for images, infographics, anything like that. Um, and again, this is something that can be auto-generated, and then you can refine it again afterwards. I'm just kind of conscious of the time now, just to be able to get through a few bits. The other thing that can be quite a nice way to make any of your media or anything like that a little bit more accessible is to use thumbnails on them. So say if you've recorded a video yourself and maybe you're hosting it on YouTube or Vimeo or something, um, you do get the option to kind of choose what thumbnail you use. So you can kind of scrub through the video and pick a still frame for it. And if you add that, it can make it easier for people to kind of scan the content and pick out what they need based on that, depending on obviously of the thumbnail that you use. But just another kind of nice way of giving people a few different ways to kind of access your content. Okay, so I'm just going to move on and look at Zoom specifically, but a lot of this is kind of applicable in Teams as well, or other kind of live conferencing systems that you might be using. But it's all a part of kind of making the online environment as inclusive as possible, really. Um, so we were looking at some of the options for sort of on-demand media, I suppose you could say. But here, one of the tips really for Zoom itself is offering accessibility options during live sessions as well as for recording. So there's options in Teams and in Zoom for turning on captions while you're running your session. So this is just again an example for Zoom. You can enable closed captions for the live sessions. You can also um, in Zoom you can kind of do the spotlight feature as well. So it kind of helps to keep um, participants or a participant visible at all times. So this might be useful if you have somebody who needs a sign language interpreter, that you're able to spotlight that video as well. It kind of stays up. Um, there's other things as well, like to help kind of remove distractions. Zoom has a feature called focus mode, and it basically kind of hides other people's videos during a session, just if it is going to cause any kind of distractions. Another thing that's recommended as well, and again, this is something that's available in Teams as well, is to turn on the blur on the background, just in case there's anything in the background that might distract someone if they're trying to pay attention to something. There's all these kinds of ways that you can sort of uh, improve your live sessions, and just trying to help people to focus a little bit more and to avoid the distractions. Another thing as well is to generate a transcript as well for your session if you're providing a recording afterwards or anything like that. It helps people to be able to search for the information that they might need, kind of quickly kind of get to the content that they might need. Um, One example of this would be, say you have somebody who's attended all of your sessions, maybe they got distracted for a few seconds within a session and missed like just the key linkage that you've provided between maybe the content and some assessments or something like that. All it takes is a few seconds for someone to be distracted. The transcripts, making them searchable, it lets them kind of jump to the information that they need. This is an example of a Zoom recording. The transcript is auto-generated, but it can be edited afterwards. You can see where someone can search it, and they can actually jump to that point in the video then, just from searching through the transcript. So it can be quite useful for students maybe who are revising or anything like that. Um, Zoom also has these recording highlights, so that kind of um, it automatically marks what it thinks are kind of important points in your recording. But you can also edit these as well, and you can mark things as important. Zoom also creates chapters as well automatically. And again, you can adjust these afterwards based on kind of the content that you're going through. All of this just kind of helping to guide people to the content, or kind of make it a little bit easier to understand or to go over. Another feature that's quite useful is providing audio only recording. So that's it might be useful for, again, somebody who's commuting, that they can listen back to something. Maybe they're out for a walk when they're trying to go over things. Just giving them that extra option. They'd still have the video recording, but they also have the audio recording. Again, very useful around revision times as well for students, just to kind of revisit any of the content there. I'm just going to quickly go through some points for Canvas. Again, I'm aware that it's not applicable to everybody who might be viewing this. But again, it's something that you can maybe take with you to if you're creating content in other kind of in digital environments. So you're basically kind of guiding what the one of the big points here is to try and guide learners or students or anybody, any end user, guide them to the content that you want them to be accessing, or just try to make it as easy as possible for them to make connections between the content that you've shared. I mentioned at the start of this all the kind of the difficulties that people, or I suppose some of the difficulties that people can encounter when accessing information digitally. It's very difficult to address everything on that, but I think if we kind of, by doing some of these steps, we can kind of maybe address some of it at least. So it might be kind of useful to do that, to kind of build in a few different steps, and then you're kind of able to address some of those considerations. So Canvas has this homepage feature that makes it easy for you to kind of introduce your module or introduce yourself, and basically try to manage expectations for your learners. So what you're basically doing is kind of saying, introducing yourself and maybe saying how students should expect to hear information from you, hear updates, how you expect maybe that you might be using announcements for your classes, that all of the things that they might expect from you. It kind of limits the amount of queries that they might send into you, but it's also something that you can maybe, if it's how you work generally across most of your modules, it's something you can kind of copy and paste into different modules and just do quick updates on it. You can also do things like link directly to areas in Canvas to kind of better guide people to those areas. So for instance, if you mention a particular area of your Canvas module where you might store all your class slides or anything like that, you can link directly there quite quickly. The syllabus is another feature as well that's in Canvas. It gives people basically a summary of the module. Again, you can put in a bit of an introduction there as well. They get their Canvas calendar, they get information about their assessments and any kind of upcoming relevant calendar information as well for that particular module. It sort of helps people to focus in on any kind of upcoming tasks and kind of manage their time a little bit easier. Speaking of managing time, I haven't done a good job of that, so I'm going to try and speed up a small bit. Another thing as well, which we always try to advise on, is how to kind of keep a consistent structure and a consistent layout to your Canvas modules. So again, this would be relevant regardless of where you're sharing your information or who you're sharing it with, basically. Try to stay consistent with using meaningful titles for any of the files that you might be uploading or sharing. How you lay out the information. So for instance, in Canvas, you have your introduction, you have content that's divided basically by week or anything like that. So anybody who's coming to your content will know what to expect, and they'll be able to find things a little bit easier. Another thing as well is sort of to kind of remove any redundant links in the navigation. So, just really try to focus in the content that you have. It'll also help you to kind of guide your learners to the information in a few different ways. So whether you're providing links within the text, so say you have an announcement and you're telling people that there's a new assessment or something like that, you can include a direct link to that. Or you can direct them to the kind of the module navigation as well. And if it's cut down, it's easier for them to be able to kind of see where they need to go within the module. There's a few different things as well that you can do in Canvas in terms of reviewing content. So one of the things you can do is use the student view to be able to kind of see how the students would be able to if they'd be able to access all the content. And the other one as well is to use the link validator, and that helps to kind of identify any broken links that might be there that might create a barrier for anybody who's trying to access the content. There's a few different ways to kind of foster a sense of community or collaboration for students. So that would be like the groups feature within Canvas. It also has this sort of collaborative space where you can students can have like a little bit of a discussion area themselves and everything like that, which you have oversight of. It can kind of help to again just kind of create this kind of supportive environment. But the main things with Canvas or any sort of digital environment where you're kind of sharing materials is consistency in terms of the language that you're using, in terms of the layout that you're using. Keep things simple. The structure and the design of it doesn't have to be fancy or anything like that. If it's nice and simple. Again, we've got our kind of our plain simple language, or as simple as we can get. And as I said as well, using the student view feature that's there. I mentioned another mnemonic. I think I called it an acronym earlier, but this is another one that's kind of more applicable, I suppose, to um, something like Canvas or where you might be sharing like recordings or anything like that, because it includes things like the recordings, the structure, it has links, fonts, and everything like that. So that's another one that can kind of again be a helpful reminder for the sort of the guidelines that are there around digital accessibility. So this one is Thrives, so tables, hyperlinks, recordings, inclusive font, visuals, examine, and structure. I'm just aware of the time there, so I just want to point you, I suppose, to a couple of resources. So one of them is the Tell Knowledge Base. We've some resources there on kind of some of the stuff that I've covered here, digital accessibility, and supports there in terms of assessment accommodations, maybe that can be done a little bit easier in Canvas. I mentioned the accessibility checker or the accessibility guide, I should say. It's called You Do It in Canvas. Um, that is something that we rolled out there last year. If anybody is interested in using it or providing feedback or anything like that, I'd be more than happy to have a chat with you. Uh, it it's already a busy week. Next week is going to be even busier. But if this is something that you're interested in kind of trying to improve maybe the accessibility of your Canvas modules or anything like that, do please get in touch. You can email me directly, and I'll be happy to have a chat with you on it. It is something, for anybody who non-academic staff or anything like that, I'm happy to set up a sandbox module in Canvas so you can kind of have a look at how that might work. Because again, even things that you might be sharing in Canvas or the way that you might be sharing them in Canvas or designing and developing content, it's applicable in many digital environments that you might be working in. So um, it might be useful. I'm going to stop talking. Um, and if anybody has any questions or anything like that, do please let me know. As I said, happy to chat with you um, after this as well. I'll send out some of those links that I mentioned there in it. Things like the color contrast checkers, There's a few different bits, and I'll send you some of the links to our support as well and the recording. Thanks so much.